Record. Perfect. Well, welcome everybody to the Oregon Department of State Lands Budget Information Session. My name is Anthony Sparrow. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Interim Communications Director for DSL, and I'll be moderating tonight's Budget Information Session. It's very exciting to see so many folks joining us to learn more about DSL's budget, its legislative concept ideas. I'm going to quickly review our agenda and introduce the DSL team who will be presenting today. First, DSL Director Caitlin Lavelle will provide a high-level introduction about DSL's work and strategic goals and what role our budget plays in those. Next, you're going to hear from DSL Deputy Director of Administration, Katie Hudson, who will provide a presentation about the agency's 2027-2029 requested budget. Katie will cover DSL's core priorities in the proposed budget, as well as discuss key impacts and benefits to the communities DSL serves. And finally, we'll end tonight with a Q&A session. I'll ask you to please hold your questions until after the presentation, but feel free to write those questions down in the chat at any time. I'll read them aloud or call on you when we get to the Q&A session. Oh, one bit of housekeeping. Please keep your microphone muted through the presentation and until it's your turn to speak during the Q&A session. And with that, I'll pass it off to Director Lavelle.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, especially for an end of the day meeting. We hope that this will provide you with some good information about the development of the Department of State's Lands budget. We have started this process a number of months ago, really with the intention of maintaining the investments that we have been making over the last couple of years to advancing DSL's strategic plan and our goals. You will know those goals or may have seen those goals really as helping to support a thriving Oregon, providing exceptional service, supporting schools, and developing a great workplace. We've made great strides in those 4 goals, and we're excited that this budget reflects that ongoing commitment. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie Hudson, who will dive into the details for you and will be prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And I'll give a thank you to our communications director for advancing the slides for me as we move along the presentation. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Hudson, Deputy Director of Administration here at the Department of State Lands. Today, I'll be walking you through our agency request budget for 27-29. And explaining what's included, why it matters, and how the public can stay engaged throughout the budget process. Next slide, please, Anthony. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. I'll begin with the purpose and timing of the agency request budget, often called ARB, and then we'll look at our budget structure, core priorities, and what these investments mean for our partners across Oregon. Finally, I'll outline how the public can engage in the budget process after ARB. Thank you. The Department of State Lands is preparing its 27-29 budget request, which outlines the resources needed to continuing delivering on core services, meet our legal and environmental responsibilities, and advance statewide priorities. This budget proposal includes both ongoing needs that support day-to-day operations, such as permitting, financial oversight, education, and natural resource management, and one-time investments that ensure responsible stewardship of state assets and compliance with federal and environmental obligations. Together, these requests support the agency's mission and strategic goals around providing exceptional service, protecting Oregon's natural resources, and supporting public schools and maintaining a strong, effective workplace. Okay. So a little bit about our purpose and timeline here. The agency request budget is the first draft in the state budget cycle. It is our draft proposal submitted in August to the Department of Administrative Services and the Governor's Office. It informs from the agency perspective and helps staff in the Governor's Office draft the Governor's recommended budget, which is released in December. From there, the legislature reviews and finalizes the budget during the 2027 session. Today's presentation will give you an insight into what our draft budget might look like and why. The next slide is a little visual aid that sort of outlines what the state budget process looks like. Each of the green little symbols shows what part of the state has a process in our budget. So A's are for agency, the dollar signs are the chief financial office, and then the little government building with columns will show you when the legislature is involved. We really want folks to understand that our budget is on a cycle and many people are a part of developing our agency's budget. And this graphic will be available as part of the materials that we presented today if folks have an interest in looking at that. We, of course, made it natural resource themed because we are, in fact, natural resources. All right, moving on to our next slide. So looking ahead, the 25-27 legislatively adopted budget serves as the foundation for developing our 27-29 current service level. And that current service level gets folded into us developing our 27-29 agency budget. This starting point is estimated to be around 117 million to 120 million. And it's not yet accounting for some factors that we work through with the state chief financial office regarding inflation, policy option packages, or any adjustments that get made along the way. These adjustments will shape our final current service level and also shape that really strong foundational budget going into submitting our agency request budget and the governor's recommended budget. For 25-27, the legislature approves a total budget that is predominantly made up of other funds, which account for about 95% of our agency. Additional funding sources from federal funds and a tiny amount of general fund, about 3.38% of general fund is what makes up our overall agency budget. We are definitely an other funds driven agency. These figures reflect the agency's continued reliance on fee-driven revenue, common school fund earnings, and other dedicated sources to support core programs and services. So as we move into the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the agency's core priorities for 27-29. So our first core priority we're going to talk about is we are requesting resources to maintain our current operations and improve customer service with a focus on process improvement and efficiencies in areas that require a lot of steps and/or staff time. This includes funding to support staff capacity and workflow improvements to ensure that the public receives timely and consistent service. Some of the policy option packages associated with this maintaining of core services are staffing and internal capacity policy option packages, so some staffing reclassifications, an internal auditor position, moving a project manager and a South SLU Reserve educator position from a limited duration to a permanent role to support agency operations. We have some pops in our core systems and operations. We have a modernization of a system. So our core system at the agency is being modernized to be more efficient and a helpful system for the public to utilize when doing their processes with the agency. And then we have some fee ratification that we have to do on a regular cycle that will be happening with Division 82 and Division 83. Our next section, we will continue our emphasis on responsive and timely regulatory oversight. These funds support continued environmental safeguards and regulatory requirements. The goal is to balance our ecological protection with practical, predictable processes for applicants. Some of the policy option packages we've submitted, apologies, I lost my screen for a second. Some of the policy option packages related to this are our legal and environmental responsibilities, support for Portland Harbor, and our Wetlands and Waters EPA grant carry forward. So we have a grant from the EPA that we haven't completely drawn down, so we would like permission to continue to utilize those funds into the next biennium. We have our resource stewardship and public safety section, continuing carryover of Monsanto dollars for the Abandoned and Derelict Vessel Program, continuing to use that within 27-29, and the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, providing support to the Oregon Ocean Science Trust in getting the authority to expend monies that they bring in to do their work. Our next section, we have our maintaining our infrastructure and safe statewide priorities. This priority area supports the infrastructure needed for that good stewardship of state-managed lands, submerged and submersible lands, and public waterways. Investments will focus on infrastructure maintenance and statewide priorities that rely on DSL's unique role across the state. Our policy option packages in these areas are related to infrastructure and capital needs. The state lands building is due for a roof replacement, so that's our building here in Salem. And our South Slough Reserve is working on capital improvement processes to maintain the reserve. We have the implementation of a statewide priorities, so that would be our geological carbon sequestration pilot program, our Shutter Creek redevelopment project, and then we are asking for deferred maintenance and capital planning assistance. So ideally, the agency would get permission to move forward on doing some capital planning and a 10-year plan for the capital projects we're taking on now and into the future. The next area I wanted to talk a little bit about is our funding sources. So DSL does leverage as much as we can federal grants and private partnerships to enhance program delivery. Examples include prior and current grants from the EPA, NOAA, Boat US, and other partners. A key focus of the upcoming biennium is securing carryover funds not yet expended from previously awarded grants, exploring other stable funding streams for programming so we can ensure that we maximize every available revenue source to supplement state investments. Key impact areas when thinking about community benefits. We are striving to enhance that customer service and staff efficiency in permitting and environmental oversight. The work that we're going to be doing on our modernization project will really support that. Forward momentum on housing support, especially around wetlands mitigation and permitting. A strengthened environmental stewardship through vessel cleanup and waterway protection. Sustainable land use strategies, including carbon sequestration, and improved accessibility and transparency with digital system and public-facing platforms. In our next slide, I just wanted to talk about the different ways that the public can engage with our budget. Of course, you can always attend the state land board meetings like today. Thank you for coming, those of you that are here. And any upcoming sessions. The public is welcome to participate in the rulemaking hearings, the DSL public meetings, and other comment opportunities. And then following the legislative work sessions, once they begin in those hearings, there are opportunities in that process to provide written and oral testimony. And you can stay informed through DSL, DAS, and legislative websites. And I'm a shout out to join our listserv for ongoing updates. So on this slide, I have links on the left-hand side. The first link is the link to our website where you can find all the materials for the land board meetings and watch those meetings there. There's also the Oregon Legislative Information System. So that's the system where you can go and watch anything that's happening in the legislature during session. It's quite lovely. I love it a lot. And then we have a subscribe to us link. So if you want to subscribe to updates from DSL, you can go to that link and sign up to be on our listserv and get regular updates there. All right. And I lost my window. Okay. So that brings us to the last portion. So we're going to open things up for a Q&A. Ideally, we're asking for any questions that you have regarding the slide content, and then a copy of this presentation and a summary of the questions and answers will be posted for folks to review and revisit. So with that, I will hand it over to Anthony, who's going to be facilitating our Q&A.
Sweet. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Caitlin. So we'll move on to the Q&A portion. If you'd like to ask a question, you can either type it in the chat or raise your hand using the Zoom's raise hand button, which is located at the bottom of your window. If you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by pushing *9. And then I'll dictate questions in the chat in the order they were submitted. I know a few folks have already asked questions, so we'll start with those. I'll also call on folks in the order that hands were raised. And then if we get a lot of questions, I'll alternate between chat questions and calling on folks. Please remember to introduce yourself with your name and organization if you are associated with one. And then lastly, we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask questions, so please be respectful of each other as well as DSL staff. Please stay muted unless you are called to speak, and please avoid interrupting. And with that, our first question is from Peggy Lynch. Peggy, I wanted to give you an opportunity if you want to come off mute to ask your questions. I'm also happy to read your questions from the chat.
You're welcome to go ahead and read my question. And by the way, Peggy Lynch, League of Women Voters of Oregon.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Peggy. So Peggy asks, State Lands building. So it's not owned by DAS, but DSL. Will you be able to get help from those who rent from you?
Thank you, Peggy, for that great question. I think Katie is probably the best suited to answer that question, so I'm going to pass it to her.
Hello again, everyone. Again, Katie Hudson, Deputy Director for Administration here at Department of State Lands. Thank you for your question, Peggy. DSL does own the building, and we do have tenants. The way it works here at the state is we are responsible for taking care of the capital improvement and maintenance of this building. So we plan to do any improvements on the building, and that's sort of calculated into the rates that we do charge our tenants, because the agency should be planning for those capital improvements. So that's why it's important that we get good capital planning, so we can take the information that we get from a capital planning process and plug those into those calculations for like leases and things like that later on. But yes, we own the building, and we are responsible for doing any improvements on this building, not our tenants.
So I'm going to follow up with that really quickly because it is important. I know that that DAS is working on trying to make sure that all of state buildings are as full as possible without having outside leases. So how does this work connect with that? As if this is your building, how are you working with DAS to make sure that they find you tenants to make sure that your building is full?
Great. Hello again, everyone. Katie Hudson, Deputy Director of Administration. I just want to make sure that I keep reintroducing myself. Yes, so we do have a really good partnership with DAS on finding folks to occupy the spaces in our building. That's actually a priority of the state to make sure that state buildings are utilized and occupied. So we don't really have an issue with waiting too long for folks to lease and occupy. I think the state overall is seeing less occupancy in their buildings, but DAS is actually doing a really great job of trying to consolidate and make sure people get put into government buildings. Yes, and our building is fully occupied.
Hey, thank you, Katie, for answering those questions, and thank you, Peggy, for your questions. We do have, I know you've asked another question about wetland mitigation. I do want to get to that. Some other folks have raised their hands, so I'm actually going to jump over to Mark Landauer. But Peggy, we will circle back to your wetlands mitigation question.
No, please address Peggy's question. My question can wait. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, then we'll just continue. Peggy, you had asked a question here in the chat. You asked, wetland mitigation, requesting money to help with new mitigation banks. And Peggy, are you asking if we will be requesting money to help with new mitigation banks?
Yeah, I didn't see it as part of the specific POPs, but then your POPs aren't very clear either.
So I guess to Caitlin or Katie, will DSL be requesting money to help with new mitigation banks? Is that part of our POPs?
Thank you, and I will jump in and take that question. This is Caitlin Lovell, the director of DSL, and I apologize. Where Katie and I and Bill are in the same room together, and we're having audio issues, and so we're trying to minimize the echo you all hear. So our agency requested budget follows the directions from DAS, the Department of Administrative Services and Chief Financial Office, and in that we were given pretty tight constraints on what we could request, really trying to keep it revenue neutral to the greatest extent possible, even for our agency as another funded agency. However, we did pull together a wetland mitigation pilot package and submitted it to the Environmental Restoration Council for consideration. And so that's public record, another source of funding. And that was not considered part of the overall package, but you can see details in that, I think it's Appendix B of that May meeting that they had. We are in conversations with the governor's staff to consider how the different executive orders, and I think this gets a little bit to Jane's question in the chat later, if there is going to be a mechanism that the governor presents projects as part of her governor's requested budget, so not coming through the agency requested budget, but coming through the governor's requested budget. And that proposal to the Environmental Restoration Council is sort of our standing placeholder right now for what a mitigation bank proposal could look like. So for folks who know, there's a number of different components to that. It included partnership with Department of Land Conservation and Development to enhance local wetland inventories at the local level, to explore using remote sensing for identification of wetlands across the state, working with the Institute for Natural Resources. And we have put in a grant with EPA to do that work, developing what are called advanced aquatic restoration plans, which are a part of our existing rules, and then working with pilot communities and municipalities to develop an advanced mitigation banking pilot project. So it has 4 different components that are more a la carte, and we'll see if that's successful through the governor's requested budget.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Mark, you've been waiting very patiently.
Well, we want age before beauty, that's for sure. So thank you. And I haven't ever really gone through your budget very with a fine-tooth comb like Peggy, I'm sure, has many times. But I am curious, your overall budget 117 to 120 is fairly small in comparison to many of the other agencies. I gather that most of that budget is for staff and your building and things of that nature. I don't recall if you have many grant programs or things of that nature. Can you tell me, is that 117 to 120 including what is passed on to the K through 12 education? How is that? How much money in comparison to your staff and materials and et cetera are you transferring over to the K through 12 fund? That's maybe a loaded question and depends on the year, like how much has been harvested. I have no idea, but I'm curious.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Mark. I think Katie can start on that question. I see Joe online, Joe Flagger, and he may have more of the details, but why don't I pass it over to Katie for her to take that first initial stab at it?
Yes, thank you for that question. Katie Hudson, Deputy Director of Administration. And I very much enjoy the robust question about our budget. And I will give you a shout out for saying we do have a small budget in consideration of all the things that we do. So thank you for that. The budget that you were seeing there does not include the distribution to education. So for example, we're transferring about 79 million this fiscal year to education for that distribution. So the budget that you're seeing there is our operating budget. It doesn't include that distribution because we don't use that. It goes to the schools. The second, if you could remind me again, the second part of the question.
I probably forgot. Let me ask you. Let me ask you just another question. I know that DSL is currently going through a rulemaking process on territorial sea landings, if you will. I think it's division, I don't know, 83 maybe, or 82, who knows? One of those. Anyway, in your budget, are you forecasting how much revenue from these rule changes are going to be a part of this proposed budget? The reason I ask is I think that there may be a mistake in some of the rulemaking, particularly for outfalls. By my calculation, just one individual sanitary district that serves about 1,000 people would be charged to renew their permit according to the formula in the proposed rules of about 1.8 to 2.2 million dollars just for a renewal, and for a permanent easement because they would likely end up leaving their outfall in the ocean would calculate somewhere on the order of $21 million based on a 10-inch diameter. So my question is your budget based on expected revenues that the department will be generating from some of these new rules, or is that not a part of the calculation for your revenue for the upcoming biennium? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Let me try to take a high-level answer to your question, and I have Bill here next to me to talk about specific fees. But yes, in our POPs, you see the fee revenue accounted for as these rules get adopted and the fees get adopted. The fees that we set are based on a number of different factors, but they are intended to cover the administrative costs of managing all of those authorizations and permits. They get counted as other funds. So when you see our budget and it says other funds, sometimes it is common school revenue, statutory common school fund revenue, and then sometimes it is this other fund that comes in and backfills. And in our proposal, we acknowledge that those fees will be coming in and offsetting. And so it's not 100%. Oh, sorry, our lights went out. It's not 100%, but they do get accounted for. They are included and they make a small portion of our total overall revenue. What you, I think, were referring to was really the Common School Fund as a whole, and that is managed by the Department of Treasury. And most of the funding that is coming to Department of State Lands and going to the common schools, to the schools, comes through the interest generated by that fund. And there's a specific formula that is directed by the Department of Education for how those funds get distributed to the school. So it really is derived from the interest. And there's a really wonderful presentation in a past land board meeting. I can't remember the date, if it was February or December of just this past year, from Treasury presenting the Common School Fund performance and how that is doing. So we are not necessarily competing with the schools in that, but our operating expenses do primarily derive from the Common School Fund, and those fees that we're adopting are our way of trying to have those applications, then the user groups pay for the administrative costs, so it's not coming out of the interest from the Common School Fund. So at a high level, that's I think getting to the heart of your question. If not, please let me know, and I'm happy to pass it to Bill to speak to specific rates on authorizations and leases for submerged and submersible and territorial seas. Mark, oh, are you on mute? You may be on.
Yeah. No, I apologize. I have a little background noise. I have regrettably a new puppy. So, having said that, I've made an inquiry with your staff on this already, and I appreciate. I'm just trying to put the puzzles or put the pieces to the puzzle together. So I appreciate your response and thank you very much.
Ellie, I see your hand is up. Do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And sorry, hope it's okay that I just hop in here. I thought it might be helpful. Mark, it's good to see you again, Peggy, everyone. Mark, I just wanted to let you know that I talked through that question that you sent Danielle, and she's working on a response to you, and she'll work with you to make sure we get that also included as part of the public comment, so that subject matter experts can factor that into their rule language changes. I also wanted to share that. So the Division 83 undersea cable and territorial sea infrastructure fees, that rulemaking is initiated because we passed Senate Bill 793 in the 2025 session.
Yep.
And if you look back, if you remember, you were there. If you look back at the language in the bill, we are statutorily obligated to make sure that the fees are calculated to offset the cost of staff time to administer the program. So that's kind of our statutory commitment there. It's not making a quick buck off this process. But the part that's complicated that Caitlin was kind of getting to is until, each application, each cable is going to cost a different amount of money under the new fee formula. And so depending on the length of the cable, the location, the impact, the material that the cable is made of, all of that is calculated to determine the ultimate easement cost. So there's no $1 amount that we can say this is the fee revenue that will be realized until those applications come in. It's more of a budget placeholder, saying that we intend to realize revenue and that the legislature recognizes that we intend to realize that revenue. So I think we can also get more into the nitty gritty if you'd like and talk about what data we have from past cables that can help us understand that. So that might be a little bit more helpful, wonky stuff for you.
No, and I appreciate this response, Ellie, and I don't mean to hold up your entire staff at DSL on this discussion, but I'm not necessarily worried about cables landing. I'm worried about sanitary districts and cities who have sewer outfalls going out with much larger diameters than the cables you're talking about. And so I'm really fearful that the current formula is weighted very much against public entities providing a public health service who are not in any way making a profit, just as DSL does as a government entity. So hopefully we can find a common ground where that makes sense for the communities they're trying to serve. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's an excellent catch on that rulemaking. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Ellie, for hopping on. We do have another question from, I'm going to butcher this last name, Jane Baccieri. Apologies, Jane, if I got that wrong. Jane asks, how will DSL's 27-29 ARB address the governor's Executive Order 25-26 to prioritize state agency investments and programming for climate resiliency?
Thank you. And again, this is Caitlin Lovell, Director of Department of State Lands, and it's Jane Baccieri. I know that name well. The governor's executive order really asked us to do what we could within the resources that we have. And so I will actually turn it over to Allie Ryan Hansen, who is our lead for the DSL's Executive Order and for folks who aren't aware, the Executive Order 2526 is related to climate resiliency for natural and working lands, and it's directed at primarily the natural resource agencies to help develop climate resiliency across their work lines. And right now, the agencies are drafting draft work plans that include what we can do with our existing resources and what we could do if we had more resources. And those are going to be consolidated by the governor's office for, I believe, final agency work plan, a consolidated work plan later this fall. I'll let Allie speak to what we have in ours in terms of existing budget ideas and potential new streams.
Sure thing. Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Jane, for the question. I will first say, that this is a particularly exciting executive order for DSL because our work touches climate resilience in so many different ways. We are a landowner who integrates climate resilience into our management of working lands and waterways, and we're pursuing opportunities through some things that are in this budget, like carbon sequestration, our carbon project with Tagami, as well as the Elliott State Research Forest Carbon Project. We're also, a regulatory agency that protects and invests in natural infrastructure. We're a technical partner for communities, helping support with their climate resilience. And then we're a key source of scientific information and practical information about climate change impacts and climate resilience in both coastal environments through South Slough Reserve, and then through the Elliott State Research Forest as well. So there are a lot of potential connection points and a lot of opportunities. The work plan that we have drafted as a starting point is in its very early stages, really looks for two things. What are actions we can take right now to be responsive to each of the directives of the executive order, either within existing resources where we can think differently and collaboratively between multiple programs and potentially multiple agencies, and think about how can we lift up this work and maybe move the needle even more. So we've got some of that exploration happening in the arena of what can we do right now, especially around mitigation solutions, both for aquatic resources, mitigation through removal fill permitting, as well as potential opportunities for mitigation on the lands that we manage. So there are pieces like that, also exploring opportunities for creating potentially resilience hubs at South Slough Reserve and the Elliott State Research Forest headquarters at Shutter Creek. There's planning underway for Shutter Creek that touches on potential for that to contribute to resilience and recovery. So we're exploring those things in our work plan. And then those are the kind of things that we're looking at near term of strategies that we could put on the ground this biennium or upcoming in 27-29, and could implement to varying degrees depending on resources. And then the other thing that we're looking to do is to integrate exploration of how our work advances the EO, either does or could potentially do more or do new things into our upcoming strategic planning work. So our work plan has a significant amount of strategic scoping, both in how we support stewardship of other folks' stewardship of lands and management of lands and waters for resiliency, to how we manage our lands and our responsibilities, and then how we support communities in becoming more resilient, particularly to fire and other natural disasters. I'm very excited about this. So thank you for your patience and my long answer to a very straightforward question.
Thanks, Allie. And just to give some context, I am the director of the Alaca Alliance, but also a member of the Oregon Ocean Alliance. And so I'm sort of wearing my Oregon Ocean Alliance hat as I listen to this
Yeah.
budget hearing. And one of the priorities of the Oregon Ocean Alliance is ocean climate resiliency. And so just kind of interested in what's happening. And I honestly have not had an opportunity to kind of keep up with what is happening across all the state agencies with implementation of the EO. So I appreciate you kind of giving me some background, and also want to put out there that if there are coastal and ocean initiatives and programming that DSL is working on, to reach out to the Oregon Ocean Alliance, because we'd be happy to learn more about that and see how we can support your efforts.
Totally. In that case, Jane, there is one thing that I will add. There's a specific directive of the executive order that asks DSL and the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to explore opportunities for nearshore resilience and how that can contribute to a resilient and thriving Oregon. And subgroups are forming. Part of this work is looking at each directive and each subpart of the executive order and really focusing in on what does it ask us to do, and then collaboratively working on that. And that is something that is coming down the pike, and DSL is excited to be a collaborator on, but specifically directs engagement with ocean organizations.
Well, thanks so much for the work you guys do.
Thank you, Jane, for your question. Thanks, Allie, for that really comprehensive overview. Peggy had two additional questions. They actually were both, Allie, you had touched on both the executive order and the Elliott. But I wanted to read out these questions mainly to give you an opportunity to address them directly, as well as if you had any adds. And so Peggy asked, for respective to the executive order, when will the public, I guess, when will we see a wish list available for the public to see?
Thank you, Ann. I'll jump in on that one. And thank you, Peggy, for that question, because it's something that there isn't a clear answer yet. They are discussing it even this week. But right now, it seems like the goal is the fall. And so I don't have an exact month or date for you, but they are working right now. They're in the internal vetting and review process. And so hopefully soon. And we will certainly let you know. I think it would be important to let people know the different work we're doing. I will also jump ahead on the Elliott question, if I may, Anthony.
Sure.
The Shutter Creek request that is in our POP is related to the HUD grant that we received as part of the original Shutter Creek transfer. So there's about $2 million left to spend down on that we are using right now. There are 2 facilities managers as well as some basic improvements. And we are using that money to do a facilities plan with OTAC, an engineering company. And so we've had a couple of targeted engagement meetings on that with partners and have since reached out to the tribes to engage their interest in helping us develop a tribal presence on Shutter Creek. And then, as Allie mentioned, working with emergency management professionals on how we can develop Shutter Creek as a emergency response and resiliency hub for the community itself. The money for the Elliott operations, the actual staff and the management of the Elliott, we presented to I'm going to get this wrong, so Ellie can correct me if I butcher this, but the Natural Resources Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee back in February at Legislative Days. And in that, we demonstrated a forecasting of revenue from both timber and carbon sales that would put us on. Thank you. I'm getting the thumbs up from Ellie. I'm learning my committees. That revenue would put us on a path. We did different scenario planning. So sort of a high revenue scenario versus a low revenue scenario, and when that would project potentially self-sufficiency for the Elliott. Worst case scenario is potentially the end of 2029. So Currently, the Elliott is included in our continuing service level, our CSL base, and that would be replaced as the revenue comes in through the 27-29 session as we generate that. For specifics, we have our first timber sale went out and was bid on, and we are proposing planning successive timber sales every 3 months. And then the carbon sale, we just wrapped up our inventory, and we've contracted with a company called Anew that has designated this project on the carbon registry, and we expect to be selling credits, or they will be selling credits starting in 2027 as they work through the certification process. So that's the projection right now. So you don't see it as a specific pop in 27-29, and our goal is to make it completely self-sufficient by the end of that biennium.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. I don't see any other questions. I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'll just give y'all a minute to think. Yes, Melanie?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Hey, Caitlin, good to see you. More comment than a question. Thank you for the effort and the investment in improving the permitting services. Super appreciative of Oregon being more protective of wetlands and waterways, especially with the federal things happening now, but definitely keenly interested in how, also in the terms of climate resilience, we can expand some of the authorizations for restoration projects as part of that efficiency program. So thank you for putting some efforts into that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the recognition that we're trying to find easier ways to get good projects out the door. And we've been doing a lot of site visits. We were just out on the coast with Crest, actually looking at others and hearing. So the work that American Rivers does and our other restoration partners, we are not only looking for ways that we can improve, but also ways that we can partner. So thinking about OWEB and watershed councils and how can we make our dollar stretch further and serve multiple needs, and especially when federal funding is not nearly as abundant as it used to be for small nonprofits. So we are open to continuing to explore opportunities for improvement, both from the regulatory as well as the just the funding and permitting partnerships.
Thank you, Melanie, for the comment and for your response, Caitlin. Does anyone have any other questions? All right. Well, if not, first off, thank you everyone for your questions and your input. Hearing from you now really helps us shape and refine our proposed budget. But this will also not be the last opportunity for you to share your perspective on DSL's budget or legislative concept, as there are many participation opportunities ahead. Katie had mentioned this, but to stay informed, you can sign up to receive email updates from DSL at oregon.gov/DSL. And we will be posting this meeting, the presentation, and a summary of questions and answers on DSL's webpage. We'll make sure to send that link out to everybody. So if you receive the link for this, you should receive links for those as well. And then to close us out here, I'm going to pass it off to Caitlin for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Anthony. I just want to thank everyone sitting through these meetings. I've sat through so many of them in my lifetime, are really dry and boring. And I appreciate you all taking time to not only out of your day, but asking really great and important questions. If you'd like, on June 9th, we will be presenting the budget to the State Land Board. Those materials are currently posted on the State Land Board's website that is posted, that Allie put into the chat. And that will be a great opportunity to hear their questions, and that will help inform the final development of our budget that we will submit in the fall. Actually, it's August, right, that we submit it, Katie? Yes, we're end of August, we will submit our agency requested budget. So this is your first view of it, and we welcome your feedback and your great questions. Thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thanks all.
Thank you.